So today's job is to fit the dado rail around the whole of the landing and also the skirting board, and then follow the dado rail down the staircase. I've already done quite a detailed video last year on how to fit picture rail, and a lot of this is very similar, so I'm not going to kind of do it like a tutorial. Just to recap what I'm going to use on the job itself. The dado rail is quite slim and very easy to cut. It's a nice clear pine, so I'm just going to use a small mitre box and a fine tooth saw, and that will give us our straight cuts. And the corners, when we need to mitre anything, we'll mitre it and then scribe, and that's another thing I'll kind of touch on in a minute. In order to do that, scribing, you want a coping saw, and that's so you can follow around the pattern of the moulding, and we can get a nice tight fit in the corners. Then you need some construction adhesive or even wood glue if you're going on to panelling, and that's to kind of get our main fix on the wall. And then we'll use some fixings as well to hold it whilst the adhesive goes off and give it a little... Sorry. And that adhesive will just hold the dado rail onto the wall whilst we get those fixings in place. And when it comes to the fixings, I'll either use some nice thin brads into the stud-work for the dado rail, or if needs be, and it's quite a bendy, curved section of wall, we can pull it in with some screws. The dado rail is actually one of those things that's kind of gone out of fashion, and in some situations it looks a bit naff, especially if it's a modern home to put it in. I'm not a fan. But actually when you put it in a period home with high ceilings, tall skirting boards, it does work. And it serves quite a practical purpose, especially going up and down stairs. It's kind of where your arm would hit the wall, and if you're going to have it in a dining room, it's where your chair would hit the wall as well. So it does serve a practical purpose. We're going to start in that corner and work our way back round. Most of these cuts are fairly simple. There isn't many corners to do. So when it comes to the height of the dado rail, everyone's kind of got different opinions. Every house is slightly different. And of course, if you've got much higher ceilings, then you might bring it up a little bit. If you're going to use it in a dining room, then you want to make sure it's where your chairs would hit the wall. I'm going to take ours up just over 1 metre, to about 105 centimetres, 42 inches. And I think that will give us the right sort of balance. It's just over 1/3 of the way up the wall. That's where kind of arms will hit. So I'm not going to trust our floor at all, so I'm just going to make a mark at 105. 105 will be, I think I'll probably make that the top of the dado. I'm going to use a nice long spirit level to mark that along the wall. Because the window is not fitted yet, I'm not going to do the bit that goes around the reveal. So if we butt this first piece into the wall, and then the next piece will scribe over that in the future. So rather than dangle a tape measure around, I'm just going to hold it up and then mark it with a pencil. It's going to be just as accurate and a lot easier. I just realised that the mitre box I've brought up is actually for coving, so it's only got the angles, but that's okay. We can use the end of it. It's still going to be square. So what I'm going to do is cut it a little bit over, and then I can creep up on it just to make sure it fits nicely. And in case you're wondering, yes, we're replacing the carpet. Find our mark. Good, that's getting nicely. And you can see that there is a bit of a curve in our wall here. So we're going to have to pull it in. I'll probably do that with a screw on the end there. So one thing you'll notice is we've already done the knotting and the undercoating on this, so there's less chance of getting stuff on the wall. But I have left the last coat of eggshell on this one, which means once it's in place, we can do the fixings, we can fill the holes and paint it and finish. We'll just have to be careful with the painting. Ideally you want to do this with someone because it's a bit of a balancing act, and the last thing you want to do is smear grip fill up the wall. But I'm on my own, so we'll do a bit of balancing. So fortunately I can see the studs because they're exposed at the bottom here. Otherwise you might want to find where your studs are. Okay, want to get this really level. As soon as we throw this up and then we've got the skirting board, it's going to become quite obvious if things are off. Good, now we've got these two fixings in, it's pretty much level. Got quite a straight wall here. Where the wall tapers off, we'll probably end up pulling this end in with a screw. Just trying to get it in really tight, because the last thing I want to do is end up with loads of gaps and caulking to do. I put those few extra fixings in here, didn't need a screw to pull in, just a few extra nails. So we'll move along, we've got some small bits to do, and then we've got the long section down the staircase. $1 mil too long. Like a glove. This is a lot quicker than getting the architraves fitted. So we're flying around now, so I've got to fit this section along here. But at this end I've got an architrave in place with a very small gap, so I'm hoping that this will tuck behind there, which we might just take a little slither off with the chisel and measure across to there. Right, so we're now onto the stairs. I'm going to have a handrail attached to this wall as well. So what I've done is just made sure that our Dado rail is about probably 75, 100 mil higher than the handrail. So the brackets of the handrail will be underneath it. Okay, so that line's in now. What I need to do is work out the angle. So there's all sorts of ways to find out the angle. By the time I go out and find the tools needed in the garage, I could have just done it by chopping and checking. Okay, found my angle already. Second time lucky. So what I'm doing is just using that scrap piece of wood sat perfectly on that line, and that way I can just make sure that the angle is going to be nice and tight and flush up against the architrave. Okay, unfortunately I think we're going to have to butt it straight up. I was kind of working out how I could come along and drop down, but I think it might just look a little bit odd and it'll throw all the angles. But anyway, I've got the angle now, so we'll get this Dado rail cut. I'm just wondering if I've got one piece that might do the whole lot. I doubt I have. I'm about 50 mil short of doing it in one length, but it's probably for the best that we put a joint halfway down anyway, because getting it level will be a bit of a nightmare. Scarf joint on this end, which is a 45-degree mitre but cut the other way vertically, and that way we can put a nice hidden join, and by the time that's all painted it's going to be invisible, hopefully. I think we're ready to fix that first piece on now, but it is going to be a bit of a juggling act. I'm also on a solid wall down here. This is the brick wall up to kind of the first floor, and then it turns to a stud wall. So I'm going to get Joe to hold one end, and hopefully with the adhesive and just some short brads we can, even though they'll only just grip into the plaster, it'll be enough to hold it in place until the adhesive goes off. If needs be, then I might just have to put in a couple of little concrete screws or masonry nails, but hopefully not. Okay, down my way. I trust the line more than the wood, because I think the wood's up and down here. Priority is getting the top really nice and neat. The underneath won't be seen as much, so I want to get that really flush at the top there. Right, so the next bit is we need to cut the opposing angle to slot into that into that scarf joint, and then the angle that hits the architrave. It's the 4th attempt already. No, a little bit more. Almost. So it ended up taking nearly all of yesterday afternoon to get all the Dado rails and the other bits done. So I'm on to skirting boards today, and I've got to do, most of it's fairly straightforward, just doing this long stretch along the landing. So there's one scribed corner, which is, you know, like an internal corner down that end. The rest of them are just kind of sections between architraves, so that's quite straightforward. The skirting board that we're using is about 10-11 inches tall. It's quite high skirting board, so it's going to cover up all of that. I may just put a timber at the bottom there, so we've got some support at the bottom as well as the top of it, so it doesn't kick in at the bottom. So cut the first piece. It's a bit of a pain because everything's going to be downstairs out of the workshop, so I'm going to be up and down all the time, but it's just too dusty to be doing in here. So I've cut the first piece. That's going along that far wall, and once that's in place we'll then have the first joint, which would be scribed over this one. So I've had a good vacuum to get rid of most of the bits. I'm just going to scrape any bits of plaster off the floor here. When anything's re-skimmed, quite often you end up with a bit of kind of a lip at the bottom. So we want to make sure none of that's sticking out, because we want the flat surface to put the board onto. Perfect. This is mainly going to be done by adhesive only with the skirting boards, but here, because there's a bit of a bow in the wall, I'll just put a screw in the centre which will pull that centre in. Okay, right, so that's the next piece cut and brought up, and I need to cut the scribe this end in order for it to slot over the top of this first one. Right, so if we use the kid's stool as our workbench. This is a coping saw which is perfect for tracing around these lines. It's certainly not as nice to work with this MDF as with pine, but the skirting cost is next to nothing, so it just saved us several £100 using this option rather than pine. That's our scribing done. I'm just going to use a file just to tidy that up, and you can see that the scribing angle is backwards, and that's fine because that's hidden, and actually that gives a much nicer finish. So we're only dry fitting anyway. Drove out. That's pretty good. There's a very small amount there of caulking, but actually when that one's straightened up I think that will disappear. So I found a batten which is the same depth as the new plaster above. I'll just use a kind of a straight piece of wood to follow down the kind of line, the axis of the wall to check, and that will just stop the bottom of the board kicking in. It probably won't happen anyway, but it means we've got somewhere that we can fix to at the bottom of the board as well. Next two bits ready. short piece between these two, and then another one on the next wall. Quick little tip, rather than putting the adhesive on the timber or whatever you're fixing like you would with an architrave, it's much easier if you put it on the wall. That way you won't put it on the back of this and end up smearing it down the wall as you lower it in. Do you know what this is called?
Yeah?
What's it called?
I don't know.
What, like this? What do you wear? Not a dress,
Skirt.
skirt. This is the wool skirt. It's a bit of a tight one. We don't want to scratch the wool. A bit of a mess. Good job. We've got to cut a little piece just to fit in here. There's a bit of a hole down there. Pull. Lie it down flat. Shuffle that way a little bit, so you know. That's it. Then we need to put some glue on here, don't we? Big snake. Or
Like camel.
like a camel. It is like a camel. Camels only have 2 bumps, though, don't they? We'll put a little bit down here. And a little bit down the side. Ready.